When I was but a wee boy, my dad took me to Forest Gate Odeon to see a film called 2001: A Space Odyssey. And of course, one of the many enduring images from that film was that cutscene between the bone being thrown up in the air into the satellite orbiting the Earth, and from there into that space station, with, of course, the marvellous Strauss Blue Danube playing in the background. Now, if we look at the interior of that space station, we see that it was pristine, it was minimalist, it was beautifully clean. If we come forward a few years and look at spaceships and space station in films, we find that they've become a little different. They're tangled, damp, dark, dingy, dangerous places. But this fits perfectly into today's topic because we're looking at a setting for the Mothership sci-fi horror game. We're looking at A Pound of Flesh. I'm Rob Poyton, and thanks very much for joining me today on Dragon's Teeth, where, as I say, we're going to be looking at the Pound of Flesh campaign setting for Mothership. However, just before we get into that, a couple of little updates. First of all, I'm delighted to announce that we've now hit 500 subscribers on the channel. This is excellent news. This is a great milestone for a small YouTube channel. So a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed so far. And if you haven't already and you're liking the content, then please do consider clicking that subscribe button below. Let's see if by this time next year we can get it up to 1,000. The second thing is, I just want to apologise for not posting anything up for a while. I've been on my travels. I've been over to France and Belgium, and you may see elsewhere on the channel I've put up 3 reports from my tour of the Ardennes battlefields and the museums there. Now, unfortunately, on the way back from that, I picked up a rather nasty chest infection, and that exacerbated some other health issues that I have ongoing. So I've been a little bit out of sorts lately, not really had a chance to do anything. However, we're on the road to recovery now, so normal service has been resumed. And finally, just to let you know that the Innsmouth forum is now up and running. This is a proper old school forum. I'm fed up with social media and Facebook and all the rest of it. I've decided to go back to an old fashioned forum. We've got tons of topics and subjects on there, and we've already got some nice debates and exchanges and conversations going. If you want to promote anything on there, then feel free. If you want to get involved in the discussions, then please do hop on over to the Innsmouth forum and take a look. All right, so let's get into today's subject, Mothership. Now, I've been thinking for a while that I want to get back into running an RPG, particularly an RPG campaign. As you may know, I'm playing in a cult game at the moment, so that's a modern day horror RPG, and I'm playing in a Rolemaster fantasy campaign as well. Enjoying both of those, but I've got the GM itch still. I've been thinking about setting something up. And in terms of genre, I was thinking sci-fi. I've played Traveller before quite extensively. Also played a Star Trek role-playing game in the past that was very good. But I was sort of looking around for something different, having a look to see what's out there. And one name kept coming up again and again, Mothership. This is a sci-fi RPG, but it has an added horror element as well. I guess with sci-fi, everyone's going to think of aliens and bug hunts and that kind of thing. But what I was hearing about Mothership was that, yes, you can have all that, but it goes beyond that as well. Mothership was designed by Sean McCoy, and I think the first version came out in 2018, so a few years back. But just last year, there was a Kickstart to sort of relaunch it, and they brought out a new box set. I think there's also like a deluxe edition as well, with added scenarios and bits and pieces in. So, as I said, I kept hearing good things about this, especially on podcasts like Between Two Cairns and other RPG podcasts. And I also heard that the Pound of Flesh campaign setting was one of the best RG supplements ever. My curiosity was piqued. I went to Concrete Cow, well, about 6 weeks ago, a couple of months ago maybe. Again, there's a report on that up on the channel. And there, I'm glad to say, I got the chance to play Mothership. The scenario we played through, I think it was called the Year of the Cat. Thoroughly enjoyed it and thought, yep, this is exactly what I'm looking for. As I'm intending to run a campaign rather than a series of one-shots, the next thing was to see if there were any campaign settings or campaign modules available for Mothership. And as I said, another name kept coming up, A Pound of Flesh. So although I haven't actually got the Mothership rules yet, because I'm still debating whether to get the basic set or the deluxe edition, I thought I'd send off for A Pound of Flesh, have a look at that, see what it's all about. What I'm going to do today then is give you a quick run through. It's not going to be an in-depth review because A, I don't have the rules, B, I haven't run the scenario, and C, there are a fair amount of spoilers in there that I don't want to reveal at the moment, especially if any of my future players may be watching. Pound of Flesh was written by Sean McCoy, Don Stroud and Luke Gearing, with art by Jane Beauregard and Sean McCoy. As you can see, it's an A5 booklet, it's 52 pages and it's printed in 2 colours. It's billed as a campaign setting and also a toolkit for designing your own space station. And the space station in question that is detailed here is named Prospero's Dream. So we can see a couple of Shakespeare references already. Let's talk about the presentation first of all. This is in, I suppose, what we call the modern zine or zine format. It's quite different from what I'm used to in terms of RPG supplements and campaigns. Normally I'd be paying 40-50 quid for a big hardback book that has lots of full colour art plates in it, lots of artwork throughout, which is good. I have to say, in many ways though, I do prefer this format. I do have a couple of caveats to that, which I'll come on to. But I like that it's easy to slip in a bag. And I have to say, when we look through it, which we will in a moment, it is absolutely jam-packed with stuff. And the nice thing is that all your maps and illustrations are sort of integrated into the text. There's nothing here that is fluff. Everything is linked to something and has some sort of detail or meaning to it. And in a way, it did take me back to the good old days of the sort of late 70s into the early 80s, the golden age of the fanzine, at least in my opinion. And a friend and I did produce our own fanzine called The Outsider, which was about the local music scene and politics and that kind of thing. We did a few issues of that, and from what I remember, it sold reasonably well. So yes, being that new wave generation, I thoroughly approve of the fanzine approach. So what we'll do is we'll take a skim through the book. I'll explain some of the major points in there. You'll be able to see the presentation and the design and everything else. And then we'll wrap up with some ideas on how I'm going to use this and how I plan to develop my own campaign. So we start with the inside cover on the first page, and what I really like here is your table of contents is in effect a map of the space station. Now, if we think of this as a space station like 2001, we're a little bit off because that was fairly large, I suppose. This place is huge. You're thinking city size. It's got millions of inhabitants on it. And the way it works is rather than give you huge maps and tiny details of every single deck and level and all the rest of it, they pinpoint some key areas and then they sort of leave you as the GM to fill in the blanks as you need, which from the looks of it will be fairly straightforward. We get the basic background of the station, and then we get this very good advice on how to use the module. I think if you're looking for a sort of campaign setting that leads you from A to B to C, then this may be not for you. This is more about setting and plots and developments rather than, as I said, mapping every room and giving great detail about every single aspect of life on the station. And this really is the type of approach I'm looking for in my own campaign, to have something much more narrative based than that sort of basic dungeon crawl or exploration type approach. And straight away we're into what exactly is going on here. We have three main plot lines that are developing, and we get a sort of timeline here. You don't have to run each of these concurrently, of course. They can be running separately. They each can be at a different stage in the timeline. But this is all the background stuff that is going on while your players are on the station, or they're using it as a base for their adventures. We get a look at the major NPCs, their motivations, their goals, their aims, their alliances, and so on. And then we're into looking at those major sections that we saw in the contents page, starting with what is going to be the player's first encounter with the space station as they come in to dock. And these tables give us lots of options as to what may be happening. Now, my only downside to this presentation is where we get some of the print, like here we've got very small white print on black. This one isn't too bad, but in a couple of other places I found that quite hard to read. For example, if we just go back to that NPC page, that sort of purple print on black is quite difficult for my poor old eyes. However, I have got the PDF version as well, so I guess I can refer to that if I'm not sure about anything. So from there, it's a run through of the other main locations. We've got a bit of nightlife, nightclubs, what may be going on there. The chop shop, if you want to bring in body mods for your players. Of course, they give you, well, potentially lots of bonuses and special powers, but that all comes with a price. You can also buy sleeves, which are basically a body that you can upload your consciousness to should the worst happen. We're into the farm because everyone needs food, everyone needs to be fed, so there's details about how that works. That's run by the Evangelical Solarian Church, so again there's another faction that is going to play into events. Marketplaces, the court system. This is quite a lawless place. It seems it's pretty much trial by combat, most of it, or bribery, I suspect, as well. So again, although this is only, a couple of pages, there's a lot of detail on there about how the court system works and how you might get caught up in it. I think really you don't want to get caught up in that at all if you can help it. We have information about one of the corporations who help run the station, or I say help run, who are perhaps trying to run it. And then we get into where a lot of the people live, which are basically in these huge urban, for want of a better word, areas where there's always a little bit of a shortage of oxygen. And if you can't afford to pay daily for your oxygen, then you're going to end up in the choke. This is the real underworld. Again, this forms part of the plot of the background to the game because there's various unrests and disturbances going on throughout the choke. If you thought the choke was bad, then you really want to avoid the sink. I'm not going to go too much into that at the moment, but that's a deeply unpleasant place. And that also leads us into the burrows. This is where the horror element really comes in. So again, I'm not going to talk too much about that, about what might be lurking below the surface. Following that, we have some tables for encounters, rumours, establishments. We get some idea on basic living expenses. So again, of course, it's impossible in a station of this size for them to detail every bar, every shop, every market, but this will give the GM more than enough to be able to work on the fly or with a minimum amount of preparation. Encounters with denizens, of course, they might be friendly encounters, they might be more hostile, but denizens may also have rumours, information, and could also be a source of potential contracts, work, and expeditions and adventures. And then at the back, as I mentioned at the start, we've got this toolkit if you want to build your own space station. This can be from quite a small one up to something huge and immense like Prospero's Dream. But of course, in most sci-fi universes, particularly where you've got jump gates and the like, space stations are going to be quite a common thing. So that's going to be very useful for generating other places for the party to travel to. And then how to generate your various locations within your space station and tying everything all together. And on the back cover, we have a couple more random tables, cybernetic mutations, and random searches. That's a very quick look through the booklet then. I think, as you can see, as I said, it really is packed with information. There's no wasted space at all. I suppose you could argue that would it be better presentation wise to have all this spread out a little bit more, maybe a bigger book. But that caveat aside, with some of the print, this really works for me. And as I said, I'll have a PDF copy anyway, which I can go to and extract anything else I need to from. In terms of how it looks like it's going to run, as I said, this is going to fit my idea of a narrative game much more than a sort of series of connected adventures, if you know what I mean. I think one of the good things with the sci-fi setting is, well, any setting really, fantasy should be no different. You can concentrate just on your dungeon crawl, or you can have a full-blown political, magical, intertribal intrigue. So Prospero's Dream will form the main base for the characters, but of course we then have to think about our wider setting as well for a campaign. Another thing that attracted me to Mothership is that it is lore free. As I mentioned before, I played a Star Trek RPG. Obviously that's set in the Star Trek universe. Traveller has its own background. Most RPGs come with their own lore and background, which is fine. However, it means two things. One, it can restrict you in the style of play you want to go through. And the other thing is, as a GM, you have to be very familiar with the lore of that world or universe. So this got me to thinking about Mothership. What sort of background do I want? There's the obvious alien thing, you know, it's a little bit cliched, not really what I'm looking for. I do want to bring in, if I can, of course, some perhaps Lovecraftian themes. I do want that idea of political intrigue going on. There are events going on outside of the adventurer's bubble which can impact them in certain ways. Perhaps at times they're forced to make decisions, this sort of thing. So I was thinking about this, and then of course it hit me. A few years ago I wrote two novels in the Assault Team 5 series. This is a military sci-fi setting, a few hundred years in the future. Things are quite rough on Earth. There was a nuclear war. We had to get out. Earth is still there, albeit in, you know, a slightly worse off form. But with the invention of jump gates, then mankind was able to spread out throughout the galaxy. So we have a situation of old Earth and its inner colonies, and then out on the outer rim, the outer colonies. And in my books, the outer colonies are revolting. Assault Team 5 are a group of sort of special forces, operatives and specialists who are put together to help deal with this rebellion. So that was the setting for that book, and it focuses on a group of about 8 characters. Volume 1, Naylor's War, starts with their training and their first mission. Volume 2, they get sent onto a second mission. They're actually being hunted by another team. Volume 3, I haven't written yet, but I think I shall. I really need to return back to that series. So I thought, rather than try and invent something new, rather than pinch something from various sci-fi films or settings, why don't I just use my Assault Team 5 setting? Ready-made, it's all up here and ready to go. That then is going to be my background for the campaign. The player characters will be invited to join Assault Team 5 or a similar version of that unit. They're not quite sure who's in charge of it. No one is quite sure who's in charge of anything, because there's government and there's corporations and various other bodies all jostling for power, of course. And from there, they can be placed straight onto Prospero's Dream, given their first mission, given their first objective, and away we go. I'm planning to launch that sometime in the new year. I'm not sure exactly when or exactly where we'll be playing it at the moment, but if you are local to the Bedford area and that sounds like something you'd be interested in, do let me know. Got a couple of people interested already, which is great. And of course, as I get further into this, I'll do more video reports, particularly when I buy the rule set, of course. I'll have a proper run through the rule system and how it all works. We'll put that out. And then from there, as I develop the campaign and as we start playing, I'll put up regular reports on that as well. I'm going to finish the Bane Wars campaign first, our fantasy campaign, because running that takes up a little bit of time. We're about halfway through that. I think we're getting up to some sieges and battles now. So that's starting to build to a climax. We'll get all that done and then we'll turn our attention from dragons and vampires and undead to the outer reaches of space. All right, that's it for today then. Thanks very much for joining me. As always, I'll be very interested to hear your comments, questions, suggestions, particularly if you've played Mothership. I'm sure at some point there'll be tweaks I need to apply just to get things running the way I want, but that's the same for any game, right? That goes for any game, including my own, We Want the Gold, which is going to be out very shortly, by the way. As always, if you haven't already, please do like, share and subscribe, and I shall see you in the future.